In this video, we will be taking a look at the different types of test definitions within Express. For this tutorial, we will be using the modulator model to view three different categories of tests: path-based tests, coverage-based tests, and complex tests. That is, tests that are built out of other tests. We will first take a look at a path-based test. We will go to the test set folder and open the first folder. We will then double-click on the first test defined, called Test Design State 1. And when we do that, some of the objects within the model turn green. This represents the elements, that is, objects and functions, that are included in the coverage for this test. This particular test was defined by selecting a measurement location, video out, as well as a particular design state 1. And this state will automatically reflect the input sources required for the proper functioning of the test at video out: power, channel select, and source 4. If we select a different design state 2, we will see that the path changes and input source 3 is required and input source 4 is not included. So in this case, we are looking at signal flow from input to output, and in this particular test definition, all of the functions in the path between the input sources and the test location of video out are part of that specific test's coverage, where the nets are highlighted in magenta and the objects are highlighted in green. There are three types of path-based tests within Express: user-initiated, operational, and probe tests. Since this test happens to be user-initiated, it can be identified within Express by the icon that appears as a profile of a blue head with a white U inscription. Returning back to the top-level test set folder, we will now go to the test set folder called Isolation Tests Using States. We will select that folder, and then we'll select the test called Equalizer Test. This is an inspection test designated by an icon that resembles an eye with eyelashes. The inspection test is one of the two types of coverage-based tests in Express. The other type is a signature test. For both coverage-based test types, we specifically identify those objects, functions, or failure modes to be included in the test coverage. When we double-click on the test, we can see that it identifies functions within a single object, although coverage-based tests may include functions from multiple objects. Inspection tests, in particular, allow the user to explicitly define a test's coverage without specifying a test or measurement location. The third type of test is called a complex test. There are two types. One is a grouped test and the other is a hierarchical test. Let's first take a quick look at a grouped test. If we scroll down to the bottom, we can see the multiplexer grouped test. Notice the icon used for the grouped test is a group of a red, blue, and green circle with a white T. When we double-click on the grouped test, we can see, as the name implies, a group of tests that have been combined for the purpose of a particular test tactic. In this case, the grouped tests are all user-initiated tests, which are path-based tests. The other type of complex test is a hierarchical test. Whenever we have a hierarchical test, as indicated by this icon, it implies that the test is actually defined at a lower level. Thus, the test coverage is not defined at this level, but it is inherited from a lower level model. When we double-click on it at this level, we see that the Mod 1 block is colored light green, which means that some of the functions or failure modes within that object are included within the hierarchical test coverage, but are defined and inherited up from a lower level. We are going to descend into the lower level to see if we can find where the actual test definition is established. By right-clicking on the Mod 1 block and selecting Open, we now see the lower level model. When we examine the test sets, however, we discover that the 45 MHz signal bypass test is also a hierarchical test at this level, which means it still must be defined from further down in the design. So we are going to descend to the next level below and right-click on the modulator in object. Again, we will select Hierarchy and Open. This opens the lower level model. Looking at the test sets under Isolation, we notice that there is a test defined for the 45 MHz signal bypass. So when we double-click on this 45 MHz signal bypass test, we now finally observe the coverage at this lower level design. These green items are part of the coverage, and when changes are made at this level and this model is saved, those changes at this level are inherited back up through the design up to the top level. It's this type of information that is used in the diagnostic studies to generate the hierarchical systems fault detection and fault isolation percentages, as well as a host of other reports that are useful for optimizing low-level and system-level diagnostics and bit design. This approach also elegantly enables the swift embracing of design iterations or changes that may occur during design development or at any time during the sustainment of the design. In summary, there are three general categories of tests within Express. First, there are path-based tests, where the user specifies a test location and Express calculates the coverage. There are also coverage-based tests, which allow the user to specifically select the objects, functions, or failure modes that are to be included within the test coverage. Then finally, there are two complex test types, which allow the user to build tests out of other tests either at the same level or inherited from a lower level design. Thank you for viewing this tutorial on test definitions.